there's this big discussion in trans spaces about passing or passing privilege. Um, and this is a thing that I think a lot of us struggle with. I'm 6'2". I, you know, I don't have the most feminine voice. Let's just say that much. And there's this. I guess for maybe before we get there, let's talk about defining what passing is. I guess, and it doesn't mean like a math test, but like passing as in you know being able to blend in society, and that nobody knows that you're trans, and so this is what I guess people would call passing. And passing privilege is the privilege that some trans girls have, that they can kind of go out and live their life, and nobody knows that they're trans. They just get to exist, I guess. And this is a really interesting topic. And I know, something that I've definitely struggled with, passing, because uh, every single person has markers of, femininity or masculinity. We're all just a big bag of, a big mixed bag of these things. You know, I just saw recently a funny meme on TikTok, and it was kind of saying how, um, trans girl was talking, and she's like, I get a lot of comments from men, and they're all saying how, they knew I was a man because I was tall and had a deep voice. And then the girl's like, I guess that's all it takes to be a man these days, which is kind of funny, of course, but also kind of a stark reminder of, we hold on to these characteristics of, ouch, masculinity, right? Oh, you're tall? Oh, you have to be a man. What about those short kings, right? Those 5'2" short kings. Napoleon comes to mind. And, all of these other components of masculinity versus femininity, and if we exist in this binary where there's one or the other, it really kind of begets the question of how do you see the world, right? If I have 999 markers that say that I am feminine, and my energy is feminine, which is probably the most important one in my opinion, and I have one marker that goes the other way, where do I kind of go, right? For me personally, I've always thought like I have so many feminine features and feminine characteristics and all of this stuff. And on top of that, my energy is feminine. And yeah, I was assigned male at birth. So it is what it is. I changed what I want. I changed what I did. And so I'm here in this life feeling pretty comfortable with who I am. Again, going back to this kind of concept of passing, there are a lot of cis women that are tall. I have one of my best friends, actually, Krista. She's taller than I am, and all of these traits that you would call masculine, her being tall, she's not masculine, right? And so it kind of goes back on this idea of we hold on to these traits and these characteristics, and we say, well, because you have X, Y, and Z characteristic, then you have to be this way. But the world, hi Madison, the world doesn't work that way, right? We are a mixed bag of physical traits, personality traits, and so on and so forth. But the world assigns certain traits and certain characteristics as masculine. Driving a car fast. Uh, I do that still. Didn't change. If anything, it got worse. Um, Listening to heavy metal. I don't know. Is that boy or girl? Sometimes I have to wonder. Why is a razor a boy razor or a girl razor? Why is shaving cream masculine or feminine? Why did the world somehow start assigning things that have nothing to do with gender as being gendered? And so this, all of this crazy stuff, right? Like, high tights and high heels were worn by men before they were worn by women. Just as a topic, just as a side topic. And going back to now this concept of passing, it's a struggle for me still, even just the idea of what it all means. Why is it so important? Of course, for my comfort. I want to be comfortable when I go outside and I don't want to be accosted. I want to live my life in the gender that I'm comfortable actually living in and finally being seen and perceived as such. So, of course, there is a practical component to this thing that, a lot of trans people hold to the highest, I guess, the highest point of success. And I hate that word because what is success? Uh, this you might not know this about me, but about 3 years into my transition, this is going to be a little bit. I hopefully don't cry at this, but with 3 years into my transition, I had finished transitioning, whatever the hell that means, and I sat there and I was more depressed than ever because I was there, supposedly. I got to the place that I had spent my entire life wishing to be. If I had taken a picture of myself 3 years ago and sent it back to my childhood self at 8 years old and been like, this is what you get to look like, and this is the life that you get to live when you're 45 years old, that 8 year old would have jumped clean out of their skin and been like, woohoo, can't wait for that, right? But here I was planning my suicide and I couldn't understand why. Didn't understand why I was so unhappy. And it had nothing to do with my transition, of course. It was so much more complicated than that. I thought I was going to just be happy because I finished. But realistically, it had nothing to do with that. I remember my therapist at the very beginning of my transition, she was like, lots of trans people, they believe that transitioning is going to make them happy. But they don't realize that transitioning just solves one problem in a trans person's life, the transitioning part, the gender part. But all the other parts of their life that are still not great or they still need to work on are still problems. If anything, transitioning solves one problem and creates creates a bunch more. Um, and so I think that's where I was, and that was one of the biggest problems was that I had finally started to learn to love myself and all of that stuff, but I still wasn't at that place where I was happy living my life because I hadn't done any of the other things. I had spent all of my energy, all of my focus on transitioning, and then let the rest of my life go to shit, as they say. So now we go back to this thing of like, okay, I now got to this place. I feel that, for the most part, I can walk this world and no one bothers me and I'm pretty happy. And, if anything, I'm celebrated a lot of times. And passing keeps going back to this idea. And I struggle so powerfully against it because what it really says is that other people's perceptions of us carry so much weight. And I inherently don't actually give a shit what other people think. There's only one other person that I really, really care what she thinks. And then everyone else, kind of starts falling down the ladder until I go to this place of like, what do I care what a random person I walk by on the sidewalk thinks of me? Do I care if they think I'm a cis female or they think I'm trans or if they think I'm a boy? I literally don't give a shit, right? And so why does it matter so much? And I think I've kind of now finally got to the place where I love myself enough that other people's opinions of me have now fallen so far down the hierarchical list. Whereas at the beginning, I needed that validation. I needed someone to say, "Woo, you look pretty," or blah, 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 "I love your outfit," or whatever it was. And now I grind against that passing concept because I realize how fruitless it is. It doesn't actually get us to that place. It doesn't bring us the happiness that we have spent so much time working towards. If we spent less time worrying about passing and more time focused on being authentic and traveling that path of authenticity, as we became more and more authentic in ourselves, we would realize that it doesn't matter what other people think. If I am my most authentic version and I am my most happiest self, that is what people will see in the end. People will see my happiness. People will see my happy energy. People will see and feel my joy. And that stands out so much more than how somebody looks. So if you're somebody that is struggling so much with this path and this passing concept, especially if you're somebody who's at the beginning of their transition, because I know how hard that can be. I know how hard that was at the beginning of my transition. And, here I am 6.5 years later. And, I've been living my life for the past couple of years, really, really happy actually. And especially this last year and a half, as I've kind of fallen into the most beautiful relationship with somebody who sees me, and I spent my entire life waiting for someone to see me. I always get to see other people, but never someone to actually see the real me. And I think that that's the real value. The real value is being so authentic and working so powerfully as someone who is working towards their best, next and best evolution of self. That person exudes an energy, and that energy is the infectiousness. That's an infectious energy. Now, when I go out, I think I don't look like a 22-year-old anymore. Like I'm 50 almost, and I'm still partying and I'm still doing all the things, and I'm my most energetic, most fulfilled, most powerful version of my me that I have ever actually been. So if you're hunting and looking for passing, I would say stop, because that isn't where you're not going to get to that place. I was watching a cool trans girl. She posted something kind of talking very much something similar, kind of saying that she was looking for validation from men or whatever at some point, and she kind of got to the state where she was like, "Oh, that's crap," and I'm kind of in that same place. I'm like, "Oh, I don't need the validation from other people. I need my acceptance. I need my self love. I need to see myself and be confident in who I am." And the most confident version of me is the most authentic version of me. Know thyself, and then you will love thyself. And then you get the benefit of maybe falling in love with somebody else who sees that person. And that is what you should really be chasing in your transition. Don't chase passing, chase yourself.